Welcome to Tangent PropTech, where real estate meets innovation and goes a bit off script. I'm Edward Cohen, PropTech entrepreneur and your host, alongside my co-hosts and PropTech venture capitalists Jeffrey Berman and Zach Ahrens. On this show, we bring on a guest who's shaping the future of real estate. We dive into housing innovation, climate tech, the future of work, and everything transforming our buildings and cities. And of course, we go on some tangents. If you work in real estate, PropTech, development, or if you're just obsessed with making buildings and cities better, this show is for you. Because the best real estate ideas start with a tangent. If you're building something impactful in real estate or tech and want to reach our audience of decision makers, investors, and operators, email us. That's tangentcommunity@gmail.com. Hi, I'm Edward Cohen. Welcome to Tangent.
Hello there, this is Jeffrey Berman, and I am hungry, very hungry right now.
Someone feed him. Today on Tangent, we have Ken Hochhauser, partner and head of data and analytics at RTL, formerly known as Winnick Realty. RTL provides innovative store leasing, portfolio management, and consulting services for property owners and retailers in New York City. Ken actually introduced none other than Chipotle to New York City back in 2001, and he's closed over 60 deals for them since then, and he's still their exclusive broker in Manhattan.
We're doing the sound test. You talked about Chipotle, and I'm like, oh man, now I'm hungry, and I'm gonna be standing here for another 45 minutes before I can wrap my mouth around some Mexican.
You know, I wasn't sure what I was going to have for lunch. Now they become top of mind again. So I'm going to have the same. So
Ken, where does this podcast find you?
So I'm here in my offices in Manhattan on the corner of 3rd Avenue and 42nd Street.
The heart of the retail boom. And why do I call it a boom? Because retail seems to be back. Just in terms of Manhattan average ground floor retail asking rents, they rose to $663 per square foot last quarter, which is up 6% year over year and the first annual increase since 2009. I mean, retail availability in Manhattan fell to 18% last quarter, the lowest since pre-COVID levels. So retail's back. Ken is on the pod. Ken, your experience is tremendous, really, and we'd love to hear about it to start with. You started your career at Macy's, and now you advise national rollouts for major retailers. So how did working the floor shape how you see customers and what still applies in a GPS-tracked omni-channel world?
Yeah, that was my first job out of college. It was, for someone out of college, it was a lot of responsibility to give a young person. I was at Macy's, the executive training program, and was assigned to Roosevelt Field, which is still, I think, one of the best performing Macy's in the chain, and in the housewares department, which was really interesting. And, it was one of the things that helped me understand retail decision-making or consumer choice. Really, it put me in the room where the purchase decision was made and where the transactions happened. So I was put in a place where I saw or was in front of the decision logics or the decision-making or the behaviors and patterns of consumers. Yes, my world was just housewares, but it was a big place with a lot of assortment, and it satisfied a lot of wants and needs, and everyone came in with different wants and needs and requirements, and we had the ability to satisfy them and be front and center to that decision.
So tell us, what's your day-to-day like nowadays? We live in e-commerce, I wouldn't say e-commerce first world, but e-commerce majority world for many products. However, retail is clearly back. Physical space, experiential purchases are back, and a lot of it is powered by technology. But tell us, what is your day-to-day like when advising tenants and also advising the owner side?
I do a few things in a day. One is, negotiate LOIs or at least transactions where deals are on the verge of happening or beginning to happen. The other is to seek new trade areas for my tenants who have requirements. And the other is to recruit tenants to properties I have agency on.
And from the owner side, is there like a preference in terms of the type or the flavor of retailer that they're looking for, whether it be because it's more in demand or whether it's because it's more stable cash flow or more stable foot traffic? What are the owners looking for today?
So our approach, and we're unique in that we created this methodology that we employ at every assignment. And one of the first steps in our methodology is to understand the goals and objectives of the landlord. And each one has different goals and objectives. Some are as simple as just get me the highest rental price I could possibly get. Others say, hey, what tenant is going to help me curate my building to create the amenitization I need? Others are going to say, find me the anchor that's going to draw a track from the widest catchment so everyone can benefit. Find me the highest credit tenant. There are just so many goals and objectives, different goals and objectives that we see. And as brokers, we have to attune our marketing campaign, our canvassing campaign to those particular goals and objectives. It could be through any retail asset, any retail category. It could be any size. It could be new. It could be old. It could be anything. It could really be anything. And it has to have the best fit for the marketplace.
So let's talk about how the asset class of retail fits in the marketplace, because I mean, retail, it took the e-commerce gut punch, if you will, long before another commercial real estate asset class like office took the hit of COVID and remote work. So in my eyes, I've always seen retail as being a lot more innovative, either out of necessity or out of customer demand. It's been a lot more innovative than, say, office, just because of the timeline where each one got hit. So what are 2 or 3 playbook moves retail has made that office is still figuring out?
So I think both are equally innovative. The only difference is that retail their innovation has more velocity to it. And because money is fungible, it can go anywhere. Expenditure money can go anywhere. And also, particularly in New York, the consumer is ruthless. So as a retailer, for you to acquire, capture, and convert a customer, you have to have really your A game. And also we see the innovation more so than an office because you get to see it firsthand. You get to walk into a store, walk into a street front store, walk into a department store, walk into a mall, strip center, a department store. You see it all the time because you experience it firsthand. Office is going through a revolution and an innovation in and of itself. They are looking to create and draw and attract the best possible workforce for their company, retain them, and also get the most productivity out of them. And you'll see a lot of landlords investing in amenitization of the building and building a brand new class of buildings that can accommodate these new industries. So I think across the board, there's innovation in both of those asset classes. Only as retail is just more visible to us. We experience it day to day.
Jeff, from your side, I mean, first of all, how do you do your shopping? Do you do it in person or do you do it online?
I don't really shop for clothing very much at this point, but I like to look, like when I'm in New York, which feels like almost weekly for a few hours. I like to walk by the high streets and see what's going on. But one of the things that I want to talk about, and I'm sorry to pivot or go on a tangent a little bit, but this is called the Tangent PropTech Podcast, is giving your expertise. When you say that retail is back, I would say yes, but because location matters, size matters, and price matters. And let's just take Manhattan as the example. And Ken, my office is, I guess, like four or 5 blocks north of you on 3rd Avenue. And there are plenty of vacancies, ground floor vacancies all over the city. And I think to myself, like, okay, so you look at the political climate, you look at the regulatory climate, including zoning, et cetera, and it doesn't necessarily feel so landlord friendly, right? I would say that tenants probably have their pick, maybe if not the trophy class, like triple class A locations. Those are going to be spoken for by the biggest dogs in the business. But I'm curious from your perspective, do you think there will be any movement from the city, from landlords to say, hey, we have all this ground floor retail. Should we be repurposing this into housing units? Do you see that happening at all? Do you see any push for that, like a spark of conversation at all about that? And do you think it's a good idea?
There's a lot of in there, and I want to unpack it. It's really interesting and makes for a pretty interesting conversation. I just want to take a step back and look at the marketplace from 30,000 feet, because that's going to inform us of a lot and why things happen in New York City as opposed to maybe some other places. and why you're experiencing some of these things firsthand from where you work or where you shop. Fortunately, my territory or my domain is New York City, the metro area, and fortunately, we live in one of the wealthiest cities and metro areas in the world. The New York City economy is $1.28 trillion in and of itself. I believe that puts it around 11th in the world. So this economy just keeps on rolling and growing and evolving. And there's always money floating around this economy in the form of retail expenditure monies or wages that start to circulate around. The other thing New York City does, and this is important to retail, it sits in the center of the greater metropolitan area, which is one of the densest, wealthiest, and most productive metropolitan areas in the world. I think that economy is $2.4 trillion now, which would put it about 4 or 5 in the world. So it really is huge. And it's because of this size that offices tend to locate here or businesses tend to locate here, and where retailers want to locate here because the size of the pool of expenditure monies is enormous. So let's drill down to a few things about retail that are important. Yes, retail goes through expansions and contractions, and it has since the beginning of time. You could trace retail all the way back to ancient civilization, going back to the agoras, and tracing their beginnings all the way to the power center, the strip mall, or super mall, the street front, wherever. It all had its beginnings in the agoras, and you can see how the impacts of the marketplace demands of the consumers have altered that envelope, or retail envelope. There is still a requirement as part of the human condition to interact face-to-face with someone who you are going to buy something from. And so, yes, e-commerce has become a very viable part of the omni-channel chain. I think it's up to, in some industries, 20%. I think it's 20% in apparel, even more in some of the others. The dominant driving force is still brick and mortar. There's still a requirement and a desire on the retailer's part to have a connection, a physical connection, the ability to communicate face-to-face with the consumer. And there's a reason why you want to do that, is because you want to, as a retailer, your mission statement is really to acquire the new, retain the loyal, convert the casual, and recapture the lost. That is the mission statement of every retailer. That's how you grow the customer base. That's how you maintain the customer base. That's how you generate sales through, whether it is through your brick and mortar channel or through your wholesale channel or through your e-commerce channel. And to do that, you got to put yourself in a location that has the largest amount of money available, where you could draw and attract from the largest audience, draw them through your store, convert them into a customer, and get them to impart with the most amount of money they possibly can as they walk out of the door with the most shopping bags you can give them. That drives every locational decision. Going to some of the other things is, well, I experienced Third Avenue in the 40s and 50s myself, and you wonder, why is Third Avenue in the 50s? Why is there more vacancy there than, say, Fifth Avenue or Sixth Avenue or Flatiron? Well, it's not that there isn't demand. It's just the retailer and the consumer hasn't matched yet. So it's kind of more of like a market failure than a failure of any retailer or failure of any landlord or failure of any consumer. It just hasn't matched up and aligned yet. It's easier to match and align on Fifth Avenue and Times Square than in this time to do so on Third Avenue. Now, the interesting thing, there's external forces that are going on where you've noticed in this area too. There's been a lot of building sales and a lot of talk of office conversion to residential. Me as a retailer, I'm excited about that, because what that does is it adds an additional day part in the evening and makes a more robust weekend. So I'm excited about the trends, the retail trends that are happening on Third Avenue. Retail will always be important. It will always maintain its primacy in many of the retail categories.
Yeah, I really think it depends on the neighborhood and how it's evolving. Like, for example, Soho here in New York City posted the sharpest rent growth among New York City corridors, with asking rents jumping 18% year over year to $504 per square foot. So
making money at that level when they're paying rents that high? Or is this like a showpiece, like a showcase store? Again, Ken, you've got the pulse with the tenants.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to make money these days. It's not just necessarily through the cash register at that particular street front store. These stores also originate sales where a customer who is impressed by the store itself, by a connection with the sales associate, with the desire to purchase a piece of merchandise later. Maybe they go back to their home market and purchase it at a department store, or maybe they go to the e-commerce site. So a store can generate revenue in many ways. That's through omnichannel. Also, more and more they're used to generate social media activity, which draw more and more crowds. But Soho is incredibly unique because it draws from one of the widest catchments. So the extent of their catchment is the entire United States and to some extent a lot of the world. So we know this for a fact because we have analyzed geolocational data and we have plotted the origins of visitors to the Soho trade area, and they are from every population center in the United States. So your target audience is not just the New York resident, but it's the US as a whole. That's one. Two is that, and because of that, Soho is one of the few neighborhoods that actually import expenditures. So that money comes from all over. It's not just the office workers. It's not just people, commuters from Brooklyn or the Upper East Side. It is from everyone in New York City, the metro area, and the United States. So they import a lot of money, and that's what drives the rents. Implicit in that is the understanding that you are going to make a profit. And at a certain point, yes, you don't make a profit anymore, or the proposition doesn't become viable. I'm assuming that to those people who pay those rents, those propositions are very viable propositions for them.
Yeah, I guess that there is the double-edged sword of being a trendy neighborhood where, if you are a new brand and you have cash to deploy and you create a TikTok account, you'll probably get foot traffic for 6 months, 12 months if you're located in Soho. But the key is how to sustain that and make it more than a fad, right? Because justifying those rents and those 3, 5, 10-year leases, it cannot just be a TikTok trend. It needs to be providing value and more likely an experience. Something that I saw recently from CBRE and Placer is that 50% of all new retail leasing activities now either F&B, entertainment, fitness, or other experience-driven categories. So can you talk more about how you walk through the type of experience that one of your owners wants to provide or one of your retailers is hoping to provide? How do you match them with the right space or the right retailer?
Yeah, when you mean experience, what do you mean by experience?
Experience, either food and beverage, that's an experience, and categories, experience-driven categories.
So I'll use a few examples. There are two different examples. So in terms of the goals and objectives of the landlord. So I have a property at 1251 6th Avenue, incredibly prominent, highly trafficked, incredible exposure. The target catchment is the entire United States. Unfortunately, it's been for 55 years, a hidden and sleepy bank branch, but it is one of the best retail locations in the United States. So we were tasked by them, their goals and objectives is to find something really interesting, something brand building, something matching the first class headquarters of this office building, which is above and beyond your typical retail experience or retail category. Also, my rent, while admittedly expensive for 6th Avenue, is at a discount to 5th Avenue and Times Square. So those are my competitive neighborhoods to my retail location. Although I do get the same exact audience as 5th Avenue and Times Square, and I get about 10% less foot traffic. And I know this because we have traffic counters or cameras on the top of the buildings that measure footfalls over a period of time. So I have this wonderful proposition for a particular retailer. So we have at the onset, before we hit the market with it, created a list of targeted industries we'd like to go after, which can benefit from not only this location, but what is certainly extraordinary about this is that the building or the retailer gets to use, activate, and program the building's world famous plaza and fountain. So here is retail in a fourth dimension. So your connection to the customer, your ability to sell, your ability to promote, your ability to connect, your ability to impress moves outdoors. So imagine if you are a sporting goods manufacturer and you put a basketball court over the fountain, you get to introduce in front of the largest daily audience in the United States a basketball shoe.
That's quite unique. That's impactful and shocking in a good way.
And in some ways, this represents the most modern of retail spaces because it's not only the personal connection you make with a sales associate or with a particular good that you come across, but you get to also drive social media engagement. And that has become an incredibly powerful force in driving traffic through the doors. Outdoors on this plaza and fountain in front of 100,000 people, you are introducing a basketball shoe, phones are up, and they're recording and they're posting it and everyone's liking, and all of a sudden it's viral. And at only the cost of production, you've hit an entire nationwide or worldwide audience. So it's a really interesting proposition and puts us at the forefront of the merger of physical media and social media, which is really interesting. So we have been tasked to target certain industry groups or certain retail groups, including automotive, sporting goods, retail, consumer electronics, and even consumer products. So example, how non-traditional retail is leveraging certain geographic and locations is we did a pop-up with Intel. Intel, yes, the
Wow.
the
I was gonna
process.
ask what's non-traditional retail, but okay, Intel is definitely a non-traditional retail.
Intel, non-traditional, right? You don't necessarily interact with Intel unless you go to, say, Micro Center and purchase a chip, but they want to build awareness. So that trickles into the general consumer body. And that when you go shopping for a PC or laptop, you're going to look for the Intel Inside sticker. So they chose this location because it had the biggest exposure on a nationwide scale. So Intel, a non-traditional, certainly not retail, put up an experience so they could connect one-on-one with customers. The customer takes the experience home with them to their home market, and hopefully through a Best Buy or through an online purchase, they're buying this computer or PC. That is an example of non-traditional retail leveraging certain geographies and certain retailers. And we can, at our property, we can do that with anyone who wants to, connect one-on-one with a consumer. And that is really the reason why there is any brick and mortar retailer stores. It's easy to walk into a Intel experience, really hard to get into an Intel factory and see the product up close. That is at one end of the spectrum. And at the other end of the spectrum, I have a property at 114 Fifth Avenue in the Flatiron District, in the Union Square District. And it's a very robust and vibrant district. And also through our research, we found that that district has the highest concentration of Gen Z workers in the United States.
Makes sense. The new tech district.
Right? We all kind of knew that as through intuition, but we proved it empirically.
I lived on 23rd and 3rd actually, and I've seen it change. I've seen it improve, especially closer to Flatiron area and Union Square. But I'm still kind of surprised how some of these corridors, and back to Jeff's point earlier, like why is 23rd Street seem to improve, but really stumble sideways? Even streets like 14th Street, which is another corridor, prime subways and everything else. But retail wise, sometimes it seems like they should be fuller, or they are, and we just don't notice. The future of real estate comes together again next September at Blueprint in Las Vegas. You'll join more than 900 built world executives and over 850 startups and investors who are shaping how the industry works from construction to transaction. With trillions of dollars in assets represented and some of the world's best innovators under one roof, this is where the future of the built world takes shape. Blueprint 2026 will be held at the Venetian Las Vegas from September 22nd to 24th. Tangent listeners can save $300 on an all-access pass by visiting blueprintvegas.com/tangent. That's blueprintvegas.com/tangent for $300 off your Blueprint all-access pass.
For whatever reason, that just the right match hasn't been made. It's not necessarily the fault of the marketplace. It's just the right retailer hasn't made the match with that particular property. And it could be for many reasons. It's not the right configuration. It can't be modified in a certain way. So there's many reasons. There really shouldn't be any vacancies because it's not a fault of the marketplace. There is a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of market drivers, a lot of activity generators. It's just that right retailer hasn't come out yet. And here's the great thing about New York City, and the reason why you see some vacancies here than you might see in other municipalities or other cities is uniquely because the New York City consumer is so ruthless and because there are so many retailers that still want to be here, it's still cost effective for a landlord to either wait for the right tenant to come along or negotiate a surrender agreement with the tenant that isn't doing well, or that the tenant has exercised their right to terminate, invoking a good guy guarantee. That turnover is actually good. So what that does is it opens up the marketplace for more and new entrants to enter. And that adds to the vibrancy of 23rd Street or 3rd Avenue in the 40s or Soho and the Flatiron. So it's not a structural fundamental reason necessarily that it is vacant. It just hasn't found that match yet.
Yeah. So in today's lease, it's no longer just square footage and a rent number. So what new metrics are defining deal structure? Is it attributing omni-channel sales or more flexible terms, or measuring how much rent you pay based on the foot traffic that converts? Any new metrics that are being used to define retail leases? How is the length and the space valued in an omni-channel world? Has it changed, if at all?
I think so. I could tell you, I think it's anecdotal. I don't have the empirical proof. So what omnichannel does, it can, I should say it can. So if you're a restaurateur, there's no omnichannel sales for you unless you consider takeout omnichannel or delivery omnichannel. And that's still a small percentage of sales. If you're talking about a retailer, yes, omnichannel may have a greater impact on that store's potential revenue and maybe an impact on the amount of rent they can pay. So yes, somewhere based in a tenant or F&B's revenue projection is some sort of omni-channel sales that translate into a projected revenue figure. And that gives you your affordability factor. How have leases changed? Well, they've gotten a lot more complex because the rules of engagement have changed and become more sophisticated. A lease is really about what happens if a certain situation happens. There's become more ifs in the retail environment. In terms of traditional deal structures, such as terms, free rent, they haven't really changed. There's 10-year terms, 15-year terms with options. There's kickouts. There's rights to terminate. Those really don't change, and they're personal to the particular retailer. I have seen just in the New York marketplace, far more tenant improvement allowance being offered than there has been in the past. And that's to compensate. A, it's an incentivization to bring in that type of tenant, to use it as incentivization. And B is it's because the costs of operating have risen in New York City and someone's got to pay for it. So,
I think that just drives greater alignment and collaboration between the retailer and the owner. Jeff, curious from the tech side, have you seen or come across any interesting service or solution geared towards retail, whether it be the consumer, whether it be the retailer or the property owner?
How long have we known each other?
Long enough.
Yeah, that's not the right question. Yes, there has been plenty of technology that is interesting, germane to how you just defined retail. But from my perspective as a venture investor,
is it venture backable?
Exactly. And at least for us, I'm sure there have been many, but at least for us, with our model of ensuring that our retail owner and operating limited partners can help us de-risk, the answer is decidedly no. And that, again, that's not to say that there hasn't been really cool retail-facing tech. There has, like for instance, store counting technology or mixing AR and IRL, really cool stuff that it probably enhances the shopping experience for the consumer and enhances the data aggregation possibilities for the tenant. But from a venture backable perspective, we have not seen anything that's gotten us excited to the extent that, for example, our fintech investments have. That's not to say that some of the companies that we've invested in, for instance, Unicast, which does location mobility data, that's directly correlated with retailers' business. But that's not consumer facing, that's enterprise facing. So correct. You want to be you're probably using Placer, if I had to guess, No. What do you use?
No, so I don't necessarily use Placer. Look, they're the market leader and they have a fabulous service, but for our use, there's really no need for it. So when we use geolocational data, we buy from a primary source and we do it ourselves because we have different stories to tell than what Placer says, but what Placer tells.
Interesting. Where are you buying your data? Like, who are you buying your data from?
So we buy it from third-party vendors who probably the source is Unicast. So if I'm not mistaken, Unicast is one of the biggest wholesalers of geolocational data in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yeah, and there's other people who repackage it and sell, and there's other people that put it in dashboard-based systems, such as I believe what Placer is. But for us, when we do our trade area extent analysis on origin and destination study, we like to get the data ourselves because we have a specific geolocation we want to analyze, and we want to be able to tell the story with that data in our way.
That's really cool.
Here's a tech. It's not so much outside the box, even though there's more tech coming inside, outside the box, geolocational data. There's a lot of consumer behavior data out there that the retailers are armed with. They have become more intelligent, far smarter for many reasons. One is there's, credit card data that's available to them. There's their POS register data that's available to them, amenity card data that's available to them, their loyalty program data that's available to them. So they have become far more intelligent about who, what, and where their customer than in the past. And that's great. And it makes site selection that much more focused. And for us in our firm with our analytics, we give kind of the 10-foot view of the marketplace is we find that match. We take their profile and we find where that customer is in preponderance and the proclivity in which they're going to buy that product. And that's where we make the marketplace match. And that's where we start showing sites in there. So we do use tech outside the box, including your mobile data. Retailers come armed with a lot of intelligence. And even more interesting, what I'm finding, and you guys should investigate this, and maybe you're more aware of it than I am, is they're now using within the retail box technology to find efficiencies. So for me, I want to find the appropriate location that's going to attract the most people to the store in a location that's going to get them through the door. And once they're in the door, that's where the handoff to another technology is how do you find efficiencies in that store in terms of converting to a buyer and how you increase their check average. And there are systems out there that monitor activities in a store, see where there's dwell, see where they pass, see where there's an interaction with a certain fixture. And from that data, you can optimize your store from a merchandising point of view, a fixture point of view, to extract the most out of that store as you possibly can. I mean, that's an interesting thing to me because that has to do with conversion and check average. That's going to have a direct effect on any retailer's cash flow or revenue.
So who's getting creative out there on the retail side? I mean, we've seen banks open espresso bars and quick service restaurants chasing liquor licenses. So what's one brand that's, rethinking retail space in a way others should be paying attention?
Other than those, I don't know the examples. So remember what, every goal of any retailer or restaurant is to acquire the new, retain the loyal, recapture the lost, and convert the casual. And you got to do it in many ways that are differentiating yourselves in the marketplace. And yes, banks are looking to amenitize and connect with the consumer. Others are using social media, and others are just who they are. And they'll lean into who they are, and through their brand recognition, their marketing, their social media, their digital media advertising, they just open the doors and people seem to fall in through them. So I'm not really sure what I can use kind of as a muse to show you like, okay, here's the trend for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But what it is, it's creativity.
No, it doesn't have to be necessarily a trend. I mean, I hope, and I'm not expecting every national retailer to open coffee shops in their retail, although I don't think it's a bad idea for many of them, especially if they're targeting, younger audiences. But yeah, just curious if there's one particular brand out there that is getting creative in the use of retail. But we can move on to something that you mentioned in our previous call, which is that you once tracked liquor license applications as a leading indicator of neighborhood change. So what other surprising signals you're watching in New York City or other urban markets?
I am driven by the wants and needs of my clients who want to expand in certain directions in certain neighborhoods. So example, what drove me to search that database is my work with Chipotle. So after filling up their tier 1 territories, we start to move into tier 2 marketplaces. And marketplaces, we have to figure out what's the proclivity and preponderance that the Chipotle customer is there and that they'll buy, what Chipotle offers with frequency. So we're going into neighborhoods that aren't necessarily populated by national chains at this moment, but show promise as potential sites for Chipotle with the intuitive understanding that their customer is currently living there. So how do we turn intuition into empirical evidence? Well, we look for certain clues to find proclivity and preponderance. Examples are liquor licenses. And why liquor licenses specifically for food and beverage? Well, food and beverage typically is the first one into a neighborhood. They're a leading indicator, and you kind of can make some assumptions on what's going to happen going into the future in that neighborhood, depending on which type of F&B retailers move in. And when that particular F&B retailer moves in a certain concentration, it becomes a hot neighborhood, and it typically attracts a certain cohort, and they're typically younger and more experimental and hungrier. And that's one of the indicators. Wasn't enough. We had to find another indicator. So it didn't uncover enough or tell the complete picture. So we had to look at more. The other was the labor participation rate. So we looked at the labor participation rate, and what it indicated is while the population wasn't growing, the labor participation rate was increasing at a greater amount. So that showed that there is an increase in engaged workers. The other was wages. By the annual wages paid, you can make assumptions on what kind of jobs they have. And the other is because typically these neighborhoods don't have supermarkets that might serve that new cohort that's moving in. They're going to use a delivery service to find that particular, let's say, free-range chicken or prepared meal to their liking, and they're going to use a delivery service. Mm-hmm. And what we found was those delivery services leave fingerprints. And those fingerprints are in the form of parking tickets. And for this particular service, they have a particular truck with a particular color. And this is all public and it's all anonymized. And we were able to scrape the geolocation of these parking tickets, plotted them, and showed where these potential consumers might live. And lo and behold, for many reasons, Hamilton Heights lit up on many of these metrics. And that's where we put a location.
Hamilton Heights in Upper Manhattan.
That's correct. That's correct. And it's doing great. And it continues to grow as the population increases, as more and more people start buying their product.
So police traffic enforcers are the unsung heroes of data generation for retailers.
What we do well, and we look at these analogs to tell the appropriate story.
Some use Placer AI, others use NYPD. I mean, you got to get creative.
New York State liquor license, NYPD. Unfortunately, we live in a city that puts a lot of data up on makes it available for use and for research and for understanding the nature of the marketplace and the behaviors of people and consumers. And, we use that to create an X-ray of a marketplace.
Last but not least, Ken, collaboration superpower. If you could choose one person, historic or living, to do a partnership with, who would it be? And we always tell people don't choose Steve Jobs, but actually you could choose Steve Jobs because you're in retail.
Nice.
So I'm not sure who, but I could tell you what profession. I want to collaborate with an economist. And this is what I really want. And I've really been trying to strive to understand is buying power. So we all want to understand buying power, which is the maximum amount of money available in a marketplace for any retailer to capture. Traditionally, that amount has been done using U.S. Census data such as disposable income or retail expenditure dollars. But we all know as humans, we're not rational actors. So there are kind of force multipliers that are out there which would help us understand the maximum amount of buying power, because it's far greater than what the retail expenditure numbers are and far greater than the disposable income numbers are. And why is that? Well, people have a proclivity to go into debt. So that's a multiplier. People tend to spend more when they feel wealthier. So I want to build into consumer sentiment. I want to figure out an inflation figure, and predict where is that buying power going? Up, down, is it expanding, inflating, deflating? The other is I want to find out.
Let me ask you something. I mean, we want to be respectful of your time, but something that is very timely, and I wonder how it impacts data collection for retail and consumer power in the macro environment at large. But we've gone through now the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, and data collection has been halted. That includes the Bureau of Labor Statistics. How's GDP doing? Even IRS and other bureaus aren't collecting data. So how do you think that is going to impact not having data for a quarter or two in terms of the actual buying power of the market is? And we know consumption is down, and we know the top 10%, even the top 1% are driving around 50% of current consumption. So how do you think this current environment is going to impact retailers' decisions and consumer decisions?
So all I can give you is my viewpoint from the street level, because that's where I sit. That's where I do most of my analysis. I can't tell you from a nationwide level or a 30,000 foot level. But my guess is from the street level view is right now it's a de minimis impact. Money is still being spent in New York City. People are still going out to eat. People are still buying lunch, still people buying clothes. They're still buying hammers. So I'm not sure how much of that has trickled down into expenditure monies. But if there is a difference, it's probably de minimis. The great thing about New York is no matter really what happens around it, it just keeps on growing. It grows by tens of billions of dollars a year, despite the economic conditions happening around it. It just grows. And that money trickles down into retail expenditure dollars, which get absorbed by restaurants and retailers. So to me, from my point of view, I think it's either the same or a de minimis impact on how much is being spent in the community and in the trade areas and in the marketplaces.
I mean, Jeff is now spending on Chipotle, so if that's not a market signal, I don't know what is. Ken, where can Tangent listeners, retail owners, and retailers learn more about RTL and connect with you?
Hey, I would love you guys to anyone listening to reach out to me. You could email me at khochhauser@rtl.re.com. You can go to my website, rtl-re.com, find out my contact information. Happy to start conversations, happy to answer any questions, happy to start new business. And I do appreciate the opportunity to inform the audience of that.
Ken Hochhauser, partner and head of data and analytics at RTL. Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today.
Appreciate you inviting me.
Muchas gracias, and thank you for listening to this episode of Tangent PropTech. If you learned something new or enjoyed the conversation, text a friend the link to this episode right now. You can find links, resources, and ways to connect with us in the show notes, or reach out anytime at tangentcommunity@gmail.com. We love interview suggestions, topic ideas, or just a friendly hello. Tangent PropTech is co-hosted by me, Edward Cohen, along with Jeffrey Berman and Zach Aarons.